Ethan Behrman, Left Coast News.
Welcome to Dispatch 35. You might have heard this morning. Today is August the 10th, 2019, and around 6:38 a.m. Eastern Time, the body of Jeffrey Epstein was found in his jail cell in New York City in a federal facility, the Metropolitan Correctional Center. 66-year-old disgraced supposed financier. We actually don't really know how he made his money, other than it sounds like a handful of people, including the guy who owns Victoria's Secret brands, Mr. Wexler, somehow funded him. And he had all this money. Anyway, he's dead. This is a grand conspiracy, or that's what it appears on the surface, because we need to go back in time a little bit. Who is Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein is a guy who grew up in modest means in New York and somehow made it to be very successful and ultimately became the head of a pedophile rape ring with hundreds of underage girls being flown to a private island, being allegedly, he had this New Mexico estate. I don't have to say allegedly, he's dead. You can't be sued for defamation when somebody's dead. Their estate can't sue for defamation when they're dead. So it's not alleged anymore. This guy had a New Mexico estate where he wanted to apparently seed the human race with his DNA, among other things. It sounds wild. This is out of a novel. I sound a little conspiratorial today, and it's not, because sometimes when the facts are there, that is it. And remember, a conspiracy, legally and kind of objectively speaking, it's just when two or more people get together and say, hey, we're going to commit. We have this intention to commit an act. We intend to do this together. So on many levels, we can talk about conspiracies today. But Jeffrey Epstein had on a private island in the Caribbean, famous, wealthy, ultra powerful men from around the world, not partisan, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives. Prince Andrew is named in this. Alan Dershowitz has been named. He denies it vehemently, but his name keeps popping up in everything here. We've got Bill Richardson, Bill Clinton. Bill Richardson was the former governor of New Mexico. He served in the Clinton administration. We have all of these different people, powerful men, who went to this island to participate in rape, because statutory rape is not consensual. So if you're 21 and she's 17, it doesn't matter what your intent is. This is called a specific intent crime. It's statutory rape, period, game over. She's 17, you're 20. Well, except in this case, these men are in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, with girls as young, and some of the reports as young as 12 and 13 years old. This is sick. It is pedophile. It is pedophilia, excuse me. And he was the one running the whole thing. And who's been named in all of this is this Ghislaine Maxwell, who supposedly helped all of this to happen. She coordinated it. But how rich and powerful men from around the world are tied into this. And what makes this such a gigantic scandal is this dates back to the early 2000s, and a recent member of the Trump administration was the federal prosecutor, the assistant U.S. attorney in Miami at the time. When this was prosecuted, this all came out in the early 2000s, and Alex Acosta, Secretary of Labor up until just a couple of weeks ago, was the one who gave him this weirdo, almost unheard of sweetheart deal, allowing him to just say, oh, I did a minor offense, and he got off on it, and literally, and it was sealed records. That's the part. And they broke the law, never talking to the victims. The victims are supposed to be informed. There's a federal law on that topic that says the victims have to be informed before you make a plea deal. Alexander Acosta never did that. And now he's no longer Secretary of Labor. And we are still trying to figure out what exactly happened. So the Southern District of New York in early July arrested Jeffrey Epstein at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey at the beginning of July, so a little over a month ago. And he was arrested, and they went to his Manhattan townhouse. They broke down the door to execute search warrants. And documents started coming out yesterday. The federal judge in New York said, you're going to unseal these records. And so that's when we found out former very powerful Senator George Mitchell is named in some of the documents. That's where we found out about Bill Richardson and so many of these other powerful men. And the conspiracy is this. 3 weeks ago, Jeffrey Epstein allegedly attempted suicide and was injured in jail. And so they transferred him. They moved him into the mental health unit in this federal facility. And what has happened today, I'm telling you, that's why there's a conspiracy. That's why people are all talking about this. This doesn't make any sense. So let's talk through this for a second. So if you're a right-wing conspiracy person, you say the Clintons are involved because Bill Clinton is one of the people who flew to this private island many times. It's hard to know the exact number because it depends on whose information you're checking. But that he went to this island many times. So the right-wing conspiracy folks are, oh, this is a Clinton thing because the Clintons. Hard to say. But that one actually makes the least sense to me. Because President Trump is in power now. The Clintons aren't in any power right now. There is no power for them. President Trump is in power. He also is tied to Jeffrey Epstein. He said that they were good friends and they hung out. We have video of them partying together. And President Trump, then private citizen Trump, slapping a woman's butt, copping a feel on that same video from NBC News. So President Trump is tied into this. Members of President Trump's cabinet, Alexandra Acosta, are tied into this. Rich and powerful people from around the world. So it could be the Trump people. It could be, however, you have to ask yourself, I got a tweet from a follower. You can follow me on Twitter at Ethan Behrman. I would appreciate a follow. Clint Sears sent me a note, and I think he made an excellent point this morning. Clint was like, so who benefits the most of the Americans fighting amongst each other, saying it's your side who did it, it's your side who did it? And that would be the Russians. Who is actively engaged in attacking the United States, trying to divide us right now? The Russians. And by the way, this is very much a Russian MO. Somebody, an opposition person, a journalist, anybody, they kill people. They make them dead. Sometimes it's by beating them to death. Sometimes it's by poisoning them. We don't know. Jeffrey Epstein was just found dead in his jail cell, is what we know. So at this point, it's hard to know, but clearly some kind of a conspiracy transpired because he was in the mental health unit at MCC in New York. We knew he was in trouble. So the conspiracy is in any number of layers and involving any number of people, be it who moved him to the mental health unit and didn't have him under suicide watch, because that's what came out. He was not under suicide watch after that attempt to commit suicide 3 weeks ago. You would think he would be on the suicide watch. Information is coming out that shows that he is very likely, very guilty, and a lot of people he knows are involved in this. Over 100 girls is what we know, at a minimum of 100 girls, probably far more than that, involved in this pedophile rape ring. Again, I don't call it a sex ring. There cannot be consent. That's why we have these statutory rape laws. It is not possible. Consent is not a defense to the crime of statutory rape. Therefore, it's not a sex ring. It's a rape ring. And it's pedophilia because these are kids that were involved, preyed upon, roped in by rich and powerful men and threatened and intimidated into silence. So the conspiracy is who took off the suicide watch? Why did that happen? That's one level of conspiracy. Two is who was on guard and watching monitors and monitoring the inmates in the MHU at the time. Were they paid off to turn their back? Who was involved? So it doesn't necessarily mean that a hitman came in and killed him. The conspiracy could involve very rich and powerful people around the world. We don't know. But the point is, there is very possibly a conspiracy here because it's unbelievably unlikely. I follow a number of attorneys and prosecutors on Twitter, one of whom is a CNN contributor, Ellie Honig. He tweeted out that in his 8 years as a Southern District of New York prosecutor. They had thousands of prisoners at the MCC, and he said he never remembered a single suicide happening in those 8 years. A single suicide. So there is some kind of a conspiracy. It seems very likely. We don't know it for a fact yet, but we know that there were a lot of people being named that were sealed in these indictments back when Alexandra Acosta did that horrible deal back in Miami. And here's what we know today. The Southern District of New York, the Attorney General Bill Barr came out and said, we're going to investigate this. I don't have a lot of faith in Bill Barr because he's functioning as the president's personal attorney, not the people's attorney, as the top law enforcement official in the United States. The quote is that he was appalled over the apparent suicide. So they claim he hanged himself as well. But the Southern District of New York has come out. Manhattan U.S. Attorney Jeffrey S. Berman said, and I quote, earlier this morning, the Manhattan Correctional Center confirmed that Jeffrey Epstein, who faced charges brought by this office of engaging in the sex trafficking of minors, has been found unresponsive in his cell and was pronounced dead shortly thereafter of an apparent suicide. Today's events are disturbing, and we are deeply aware of their potential to present yet another hurdle to giving Epstein's many victims their day in court. To those brave young women who have already come forward, and to the many others who have yet to do so, let me reiterate that we remain committed to standing for you in our investigation of the conduct charged in the indictment, which included a conspiracy count, remains ongoing. That was the statement from Manhattan U.S. Attorney Jeffrey S. Berman this morning. Now, this is important because there are two different things that are happening here. You have criminal charges. That's when people go to jail, is when the state, as we the people, files charges against an individual or people or companies, whatever. But it's when the state functions, that's how criminal law works, to put people in jail, to hold them criminally liable for violating the law. But the big deal is that his indictment is, once he dies, that indictment ends. But if there was a conspiracy and other people were being named in the indictment, then in that case, it's not over. They can continue investigating. They can continue releasing documents. They can continue the process. And that is what the Southern District of New York, their attorney, the U.S. attorney, is saying is, look, this was a conspiracy charge here. We're going to continue investigating the rest of the conspiracy, because if there's more than two other additional people, the conspiracy is still alive to prosecute. So it's still ripe. It is not moot. Ripeness means, can we still charge these people? Moot means that they're dead. The charges are over. This is like hearing things like at the Supreme Court level. These are the questions of whether or not it's a justiciable case. This is still justiciable if two or more of these co-defendants in this conspiracy are around to prosecute. So from that end, it sounds like the Southern District is going to continue moving forward. Justice is not dead in this case. With Epstein's death, justice is not dead. But remember, he is dead. Therefore, we can say what we want. There is no defamation at this point. But that is really good news that the Southern District is investigating. One of the key things that I tweeted out immediately was there are security cameras absolutely everywhere at this kind of a facility, around on the streets around it, within the holding cells, within the facility. That needs to be copied off somewhere immediately so it cannot be destroyed. Because again, rich and powerful men around the world, again, people, Russian billionaires are indicted or have been implicated in this. Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz. I mean, the list goes on. Again, yesterday we found out about George Mitchell and Bill Richardson, but there were so many more of these. It was really disturbing reading through these allegations of these girls, but because it's very clear that this was a well-planned, well-thought-out conspiracy, this ring, this pedophile rape ring. So you have the criminal side, which will now apparently continue forward, which is great news, so that we can get some justice. but it was the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit that unsealed those documents yesterday. They said 2 weeks from now that we were going to continue getting the rest of those sealed documents exposed for prosecutors and now the public, the scope and the scale and ugliness of the Epstein-Maxwell ring. That was David Boyce, an attorney for, I don't know who Jeffrey is, but one of the people involved in this. And anyway, so now separately, you also have civil charges. Who these women, if the statute of limitations has not run, can sue for the damages that they've suffered, the intentional infliction of emotional distress, and many other, false imprisonment is very possible. I don't know what the statutes are going to be on the federal level. I haven't researched all of that yet, but the charges can move forward. A spokesman for Bill Clinton, of course, has said that he's never been to Little St. James, the island Epstein owned, now his estate owns in the Caribbean. But names are being named in this, and it is a giant conspiracy. I'm curious who you think is involved. By the way, it's weird to hear so many people talk about the Clintons, because at this point, I mean, again, I want everybody held to account. If a man or a woman were involved in the trafficking of these girls and the rape of these girls, they all must be brought to account. And I want to know who they are, and I want all of them. Oh yeah, here's another name. Glenn Dublin was another one that came out in yesterday's documents. I don't know why I left that one off, but Prince Andrew, other billionaires, deceased MIT scientist Marvin Minsky, modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel, another prince, a foreign president, a well-known prime minister, and the owner of a large hotel chain in France. Those are the names. I'm telling you, that's why everybody right now is looking at this, and myself included, and I say, clearly Jeffrey Epstein didn't just kill himself without outside help. It just doesn't happen. There's no question that somebody like him knows that prison for the rest of his life is going to be a horrible existence. But he can turn on all these other people and try and get out of it, but maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe they killed him. Maybe he killed himself. But again, even if he killed himself, to get away with that in the mental health unit at the MCC in New York is unheard of. Somebody else was in on it. It was a conspiracy. Send me your thoughts. Comment below. You can always email me, leftcoastnews@ethanbehrman.com. Appreciate you sharing this with others. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you in the next dispatch.